16.3 Monopoly and Competition Compared. In this chapter, we study absence of supply curve in monopoly, possibility of losses by monopolist, misconception concerning monopoly pricing, output and price compared, monopoly and competition, inefficiency of pure monopoly relative to a pure competitive industry, rent-seeking behavior. The absence of supply curve in monopoly. In perfect competition, the supply curve of a firm in the short run is the same as the portion of the firm's marginal cost curve that lies above the average variable cost curve. As the price of the good produced by the firm changes, the perfectly competitive firm simply moves up or down its marginal cost curve in choosing how much output to produce. The supply curve shows the quantity of output the firm is willing to supply at each price, which is independent of what's going on with demand. The amount of output that monopolist produces depends on its marginal cost and the marginal revenue associated with that price. And the price is the shape of the demand curve it faces. Hence, a monopoly firm has no supply curve that is independent of the demand curve for its product. The amount of goods offered for sale at a given price depends upon the nature, the shape, or the elasticity of demand curve facing the monopolist. Thus, a monopolist may offer for sale the same amount of goods at two different prices. You can see in the first figure here, the same quantity Q is offered at P and P1 price, depending on the conditions of demand in the market, or for the same price he may offer for sale two different amounts of the same commodity. You can see in the second figure here. Hence, there is no unique relationship between price and supply under a monopoly, and thus we do not have a supply curve for a monopoly firm. So the figure shows the D1 and their corresponding marginal revenue, and D2 or demand 2 and their corresponding marginal revenue, and in the first, the monopolist selling same output at different prices. In second, the different output at same prices based on the demand condition. Possibility of losses by monopolist. The likelihood of economic profit is greater for a pure monopolist than for a pure competitor. In the long run, the pure competitor is destined to have only nominal profit, whereas barriers to entry mean that any economic profit realized by the monopolist can persist. In pure monopoly, there are no new entrants to increase supply, drive down price, and eliminate economic profit. A loss minimizing position of a monopolist. It is possible that a monopolist can actually lose money if ATC exceeds the price that people are willing to pay for any quantity of output. Losses can be caused by change in consumer taste or by changes in the cost of inputs. Like the pure competitor, but the monopolist will not persist in operating at loss. Faced with continuing losses, in the long run, the firm's owners will move their resources to alternative resources that offer better profit opportunities. A monopolist must obtain a minimum of a normal profit in the long run, or it will go out of business. A monopolist will only produce in the short run to minimize losses if it perceives that market conditions will change or that it will be able to earn a profit in the future. If the demand and cost situation faced by the monopolist is far less favorable, then monopolist will incur losses in the short run. Yet it continues to operate for the time being because its total loss is less than its fixed cost. If demand D is weak and costs are high, the pure monopolist may be unable to make a profit. Because PM exceeds V, the average variable cost at MR is equal to MC output QM, the monopolist will minimize losses in the short run by producing at that output. The loss per unit is A minus PM and the total loss indicated by the rectangle. Misconception concerning monopoly pricing. Monopolist is not interested in highest price but highest profit. Because monopolist can manipulate output and price, so it is often alleged that the monopolist will charge the highest price he can get. It is generally believed that prices under free competition are lower than under monopoly. This is clearly a misguided assertion. There are many prices above PM in figure where he earns economic profit, but the monopolist shuns them because they yield a smaller than maximum profit. The monopolist seeks maximum total profit, not maximum price. Some high prices that could be charged would reduce sales and total revenue too severely to offset any decrease in total cost. Monopolists seek to maximize total profit, not maximum per unit profit. The monopolist seeks maximum total profit, not maximum per unit profit. The profits per units may be higher at higher price, but the total profits will be higher at lower price. It is therefore better to sell more at a lower price than to sell less at a higher price. Here, the monopolist accepts a lower than maximum per unit profit because additional sales more than compensate for the lower unit profit. A monopolist would rather sell 5 units at a profit of $28 per unit for the total profit of $140 than 4 units at a profit of $32 per unit for a total profit of only $128. Output and price compared, monopoly and competition. Compared to perfect competition, a single price monopoly produces a smaller output and charges a higher price. In the figure, the market demand curve is D. Initially, with many small firms in the market supply curve is S, which is the sum of the supply curves and marginal cost curves of the firms. The equilibrium price is PC, which makes the quantity demanded equal to quantity supplied. The equilibrium quantity is QC. Each firm takes the price PC and maximizes its profits by producing the output at which its own marginal cost equals the price. The firm now buys all the firms in this market. Consumers don't change, so the demand curve doesn't change. But the monopoly recognized this demand curve as a constraint on its sales and knows that its marginal revenue curve is MR. Monopoly's marginal cost curve is the market supply curve perfect competition labeled S is equal to MC. The monopoly maximizes profit by producing the quantity at which marginal revenue equals marginal cost, which is QM. This output is smaller than the competitive output QC, which produces a socially optimum quantity at demand curve and marginal cost curve intersect. The monopoly charges the price PM, which is higher than PC. Inefficiency of pure monopoly related to a pure competitive industry. In perfect competition, the equilibrium quantity is the efficient quantity QC because at that quantity, the price PC equals marginal benefit equals marginal cost. The sum of producer surplus and consumer surplus is maximized. Producer surplus expands and is larger in monopoly than in perfect competition. The area of the deadweight loss triangle between the demand curve and the marginal cost. In figure B, monopoly is inefficient. Monopoly output is QM and the price is PM. Price exceeds marginal cost. When this happens, monopoly leads to an inefficient mix of output. And the firm is underproducing from society's point of view. Society would be better off if this firm produced more and charged a lower price. It creates a deadweight loss, which is shown by the gray area. Price must equal marginal cost for markets to produce what people want. Consumers lose partly by getting less of the good, shown by the gray triangle above PC, and partly paying more for the good. The consumer surplus shrinks to the smaller green triangle. Producers lose by selling less of the good, shown by the part of the gray area below PC, but gain by selling their output for a higher price, shown by the dark blue rectangle. The total surplus lost, that is both consumers and producer surplus, because of monopoly pricing is a reduction in economic well-being of the people. Thus, the quantity produced and sold by a monopoly is below the socially efficient level, which is at P is equal to MC. Efficiency. Productive efficiency occurs where P is equal to minimum ATC. In pure computation, product price is lowest level consistent with minimum ATC, produces goods as cheap as possible. Productive efficiency is achieved because free entry and exit force firms to operate where average total cost is at a minimum. Monopoly firms will not achieve productive efficiency as firms will produce at an output which is less than the output of minimum ATC and charge higher price. X inefficiency may occur since there is no competitive pressure to produce at the minimum possible cost. Allocative efficiency occurs where P is equal to MC, produces the right mix of goods and produces socially optimum level of output. Allocative efficiency is not achieved in monopoly because price is greater than MC. Monopoly creates efficiency loss or deadweight loss. Society totally loses the net benefit of the QC minus QM units that are not produced. In general, a monopoly transfers income from consumers to the owners of the monopoly. Rent seeking behavior. There are many things that potential monopolists can do to protect their profits. One obvious approach is to push the government to impose restrictions on competition. A classic example is the behavior of taxi cab driver organization in New York and other large cities. To operate a cab legally in New York City, you need a license. The city tightly controls the number of licenses available. If entry into the taxi business were open, competition would hold down cab fares to the cost of operating cabs. However, cab drivers have become a powerful lobbying force and have muzzled the city into restricting the number of licenses issued. This restriction keeps fare higher and preserves monopoly profits. There are countless other examples. The steel industry and the automobile industry spends large sum lobbying Congress for tariff protection. This kind of behavior in which households or firms take action to preserve positive profits is called rent seeking behavior. Rent seeking is the lobbying for special treatment from the government to create economic profit or to divert consumer surplus or producer surplus away from others. Rent seeking does not always create a monopoly, but it always restricts competition and often creates a monopoly. Scarce resources can be used to produce the goods and services that people value, or they can be used in rent seeking. Rent seeking is potentially profitable for the rent seeker but costly to society because it uses scarce resources purely to transfer wealth from one person to group to another person or group rather than to produce the things that people value. To see why rent seeking occurs, think about two ways in which a person might become the owner of a monopoly. Buy a monopoly, create a monopoly. Buy a monopoly. A person might try to make a monopoly profit by buying a firm that is protected by a barrier to entry. Buying a taxi cab medallion in New York City is an example. The number of medallions is restricted, so their owners are protected from unlimited entry into the industry. A person who wants to operate a taxi must buy a medallion from someone who already has one. But anyone is free to enter the bidding for a medallion, so competition among buyers drives the price up to the point at which they make only zero economic profit. For example, competition for the right to operate taxi in New York City has led to a price if $600,000 for a taxi medallion, which is sufficiently high to eliminate economic profit for taxi operators and leave entrepreneurs with only normal profits. Create a monopoly. Because buying a monopoly means paying a price that soaks up the economic profit, creating a monopoly by rent seeking is an attractive alternative to buying one. Rent seeking is a political activity. It takes the form of lobbying and trying to influence the political process to get laws that create legal barriers to entry. Such influence might be sought by making campaign contributors in exchange for legislative support or by indirectly seeking to influence political outcomes through publicity in the media or by direct contact with politicians and bureaucrats. An example of a rent created in this way is the law that restricts the quantities of textiles that can be imported into the United States. Another is a law that limits the quantities of tomatoes that can be imported into the United States. These laws restricts competition which decreases the quantity for sale and increase prices. Such rent seeking expenditures add nothing to the firm's output but they clearly increase its costs. Taken alone, rent seeking implies that monopoly involves even higher cost and even less efficiency than suggested. Rent seeking equilibrium. Rent seeking is a competitive activity. If an economic profit is available, a rent seeker will try to get some of it. Competition among rent seekers pushes up the cost of rent seeking until it leaves the monopoly earning only a zero economic profit after paying the rent seeking costs. Figure shows a rent seeking equilibrium. The cost of rent seeking is a fixed cost that must be added to a monopoly's other costs. The average total cost curve, which includes the fixed cost of rent seeking, shifts upward until it just touches the demand curve. Consumer surplus is unaffected, but the deadweight loss of monopoly now includes the original deadweight loss plus the economic profit consumed by rent seeking, which is the enlarged gray area.